Good afternoon. My name is Darren Borg. I'm a river management engineer with the Agency of Natural Resources in the Department of Environmental Conservation. I'm here to speak a bit about emergency in-stream work and accomplishing that work in accordance with Vermont's regulations. It's particularly timely as spring 2024 approaches and potential for high flows increase with the ripening snowpack. The basis for regulatory authority of emergency in-stream work is the 2012 Rivers Bill, also known as Act 138. This was written in response to Tropical Storm Irene in 2011, and while it assures that towns maintain their abilities to conduct in-stream work on their own accord, the work conducted now needs to meet minimum standards. This is to assure that actions taken during emergency times move streams towards their least erosive conditions or do not propagate further instability that might harm adjacent investments. Requirements for authorizing in-stream emergency protective measures are clearly laid out in 10 VSA 1021. So towns should limit the work that's done in response period to the minimum amount necessary to reduce threats to improve property, infrastructure, or public safety. They also need approval by the municipal legislative body or someone who's been delegated the authority to oversee public safety, and they should be reported to the Secretary of Natural Resources within 24 hours of the onset of the work or start of the work. They should also be implemented in a manner that's consistent with the stream alteration general permit. While ideally notification of emergency protective measures are given in advance to a member of the Rivers team, we know that's not always practical, so we have a number of ways to contact us that may suit your town or your town's infrastructure better than other methods. First and foremost, though, is to call your regional river management engineer or email them directly. In flood responses, we can be rather busy, so we have another series of other methods to reach out and contact the agency, including a specific notification system, which we would prefer most emergency protective measures to go through. We also have an inquiry form and general mailbox that can be used for these purposes. If you do use the emergency protective measure reporting tool, there'll only be 4 categories of emergency protective measures. Now, clearly this is not exhaustive, but it tends to cover most cases of streams threatening infrastructure. They include protection of infrastructure with temporary berms, stabilization of stream banks that are threatening improved properties, removal of excess sediment to restore channel capacity, as well as temporary replacement of structures where an appropriate size structure cannot be acquired in a timely fashion. Each of the 4 general categories of emergency protective measures come with their own implementation standards, so we're going to go over those now, starting with the removal of flood-related deposits. So a lot of places will fill in with material that needs to be excavated to restore channel capacity. The removal of material should be limited to the pre-flood cross-section of the channel. Any material storage on site will need to be removed to assure that we are not creating a berm and worsening a situation by the locating of those excess materials. Channel relocation sometimes occurs, but it should really be reviewed prior to being conducted because we can set off a channel evolution process and cause a whole bunch of issues with that. Excavation of new channels is rare, but can occur only during an imminent or ongoing threat where it's deemed as necessary to protect private or public infrastructure. Stream bed or stream bank fills are probably the most common emergency protective measure that is taken in response to flooding. These consist of basically armoring a stream bank to protect infrastructure. While temporary fills can be used that are not sufficiently sized, if you are importing material, it should be properly sized to resist the flows. And if you're going to bring in appropriate size material, please make sure that it is keyed into the stream bed as well, so that it does not need to be replaced after the fact. Other item that needs to be noted is these should not be pinching in the stream because that can trigger further impacts up and downstream from the actual damage site. So we touched upon a bit tangentially in the last slide that temporary stabilization of infrastructure is an allowable activity as an emergency protective measure. It's temporary in so much as materials may not be available to meet the implementation standards under the general permit and stream alteration rule for permanent structures, yet there is a need for maintaining emergency services. So in the case of roadway embankment protection, it's often an undersized fill that needs to be replaced with an appropriately sized material to resist flows. Or in the case of culvert or bridge crossings, it's not necessarily going to be available. Materials aren't going to be available right when something blows out. So as you see here, there's a 12-foot culvert in this photo that's absolutely destroyed. There's a residence that requires fuel delivery. So there is a temporary structure in here right now due to the long lead time on a structure of that size. And then we have emergency protective measures for construction of temporary berms. Please note that placement of berm in a river corridor is typically going to further energize a stream. Therefore, berms are only allowed in a temporary fashion to protect infrastructure and must be removed concurrent with threat, or at least within 180 days to assure that we are meeting National Flood Insurance Policy guidelines. So stepping aside from the typical emergency protective measures, we also do have ice jamming that occurs around the state. Ice is not considered in-stream material for the purposes of regulation, so it may be removed based on the judgment of the town without reporting to the agency. I will note that due to the scale of ice jams, sometimes there's a fair bit of earthwork that needs to occur just to remove material if it is practical at all, and that might require a stream alteration permit. So again, reach out to your regional river management engineer. We'll be happy to assist technically and figure out the best solution if these do occur in your town. Finally, I do want to speak to the fact that the stream alteration rule does not operate in a silo. There are regulatory overlaps at the federal and local level. The most important one for towns will be the local regulation overlap with the National Flood Insurance Program. So any towns that are participating in the National Flood Insurance Program will want to document any work that occurs within a mapped floodplain or floodway, as well as assure that that work meets their own implementation standards in order to remain compliant with their flood insurance policy. And that is it. So thank you very much for your time.